So just one of the things that I think Brian's comments led me to think about was a concept you've talked about a lot, Steve, which is in the early startup days of a corporate innovation, you know, you take a lot of shortcuts, you do things on the cheap, you kind of figure things out as you go. But if you're going to become a bona fide member of the parent company, you need to do a lot of cleanup work. And Steve's called this fixing organizational and technical debt. And I just thought it would be interesting for us to hear a little bit of his reflection on what that feels like.
So I kind of encountered this talking to other companies who are doing innovation or trying to connect islands of innovation and plug them into existing divisions. In a startup, when we start a company, we take lots of shortcuts. And what's pretty understood among engineers is you hack together code, and the whole idea is get minimum viable products out in front of customers in the shortest period of time. And engineering execs kind of know eventually you have to clean all that stuff up. And the shortcuts you kind of do, as they accumulate, there's a word for it called technical debt, meaning you kind of got to pay it back sometime. And the cleanup process is called refactoring, which is just a word that says someone has to go in and shovel out all that code, doesn't add any features, just make sure it's all not going to collapse one day. What we don't realize, particularly in large companies, is when you start innovation projects away from the mainstream, not only do you acquire technical debt, you actually acquire organizational debt. And organizational debt is because in a large company, the people, and I'm curious of whether this happens at HarperCollins, but in other companies and government organizations I work with, is that the people running these innovation projects are the crazy people. They're the people that are happy to be working in large companies because of the resources, they need to pay the mortgage or whatever, and normally they'd be fired anywhere else in the company, but they're actually the wonderful people to start a new project. The problem is they get the idea going and there's some traction or whatever, and now you try to hand it off to a division or someone else, and there's this impedance mismatch. This person can't even like organize their way out of the bathroom, and now they want to run a division, right? I mean, all right. Well, without understanding, and every company I run into are going, oh, let me tell you about our problem, until I realized I've heard this time after time again, that this isn't a unique problem. That in fact, this is a model of how innovation works, and what we've been missing is accepting the fact that much like in a startup, we need to refactor technical debt. In a large corporation, we need a refactoring group that sits in between our innovation engine, wherever it's occurring, and the execution group, whether it's a division or functional organization or whatever, that just acknowledges those people coming in, you cannot make them the head of that group, or most of them, or you cannot scare them off, or they're going to be doing some startup and leaving. And so you need a process that actually makes this an innovation engine that's continuous, that recognizes that these interfaces need to occur, and that the execution people versus the creative people just have different skill sets, have different motivations, have different whatever. And in fact, you want them to work as seamlessly as possible, recognizing the limitations of each group. And what historically has happened is, oh, those are idiots, oh no, those people did shortcuts, and gee, I don't know how to clean all that stuff up. Does that?
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you've encountered that at all.
Yeah, that's why I try to get the ideas to come from the bottom up as much as possible, and then provide support or push the support when necessary. But I agree with you. I've had examples where you get something going and you can't get anybody to take it on.
And recognizing that take it on process, actually there are people who love to be refactorers, who actually, you know, are horse whisperers, who could talk to your crazy people, who actually but like process and know how to take that stuff and kind of move it over instead of forcing, you know, here's our process. Or I'll give you the other example, is acquiring startups. Why do most of those fail? Well, why most of those fail are actually cultural problems rather than, you know, anybody being dumb. Is that if you've got a startup who's still searching for a business model, that passion in innovation is about the culture. And now all of a sudden they have to fill out an expense form to get, you know, a pencil.
Or apply to legal for permission to do
legal or HR and whatever. It turns out that, you know, most startups kind of leave the corporate body not because they don't like the resources, the technology, but the execution process of all the support organizations tends to kill it. And so the conversations we tend to have is, what phase is in the startup in? Can you truly Borg it that is completely integrated on day one? Or does it make more sense for a while to keep it as a standalone group without the corporate overhead on top of it? And that's a conversation that needs to be had, because gee, your support people, HR and finance and whatever, will say, well, of course, we need to bring it in, without having the conversation which says, what's the value of keeping it separate? Why again are we acquiring this, and for how long and why? And there are a set of heuristics or rules that you could kind of use. When do you deeply integrate it versus when do you let it stand alone, and for how long do you let it stand alone? And what are those rules? And I'm sure you've been talking about startup integration as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The cultural piece is so important. I mean, that's number one. You can figure out all the plumbing and you can bring all that other stuff on later, but there has to be a good fit within a certain country or division or however you're going to do it. Otherwise, you might as well just write the check.
Right.